So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our next session, our first panel discussion, and we're going to look at 3 other tactics that are going to be vital for us in 2025 and moving forward. So can I invite to the stage Adam Weiss, for Chief Programs and Impact Officer for Client Earth, Tori Tsui, Global Coordinator for the Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty, and Shradha Pandey, Founder and Project Leader for Grassroots Energy Management Support. Yes, make sure you pick up your mics. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to read a quick intro for each of our guests today, and then we're going to go straight into the questions. So we're going to start with you, Tori. Tori Tsui believes that a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is a bold and ambitious way to strengthen the Paris Agreement, directly targeting the expansion of the fossil fuel industry, provides a clear pathway forwards for a habitable future. After actively campaigning against the oil and gas industry in the UK, shutting down the Cambo and Rosebank oil fields in the North Field, big round of applause. They are actively fighting for more rigorous climate policy because we are currently failing to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. So thank you for being here, Tori. I'm now going to move over to Shradha. She believes that the energy transition isn't about just technology, it's about transforming habits and empowering communities to drive change. After witnessing the health impacts of traditional cooking methods in rural India, she founded Grassroots Energy Management Support, also known as GEMS, to tackle a pollution source that emits as much as the entire global aviation industry. She is here, she's a Kofi Annan changemaker, a regeneration future leader, and she is really here to help prove that climate solutions can and must address social justice as well. So she is here to tell us and show us how small community-led actions lead to system change. So thank you for being here with us today. And of course, last but not least, we have Adam Weiss. Hands up, who's heard of Client Earth? Client Earth? Okay, we've got some fans in the room. He believes that we need laws that enable us to challenge everything that states do, everything that companies do, and against the imperative of an environmental protection. After a career in human rights, where you were very much working with the European Courts of Human Rights on behalf of migrants and people facing race discrimination, you became part of the environmental movement because you really understood that our environmental crisis risks overwhelming those communities that are already on the sharp end of climate change. So here to help us understand the role of law in preventing and stopping fossil fuels, we welcome Adam. So a big round of applause. And I would like to start with a broad question, and then we're going to dive into each of these specific tactics that we're going to look into. So we'll start with you, Tori. But the question really is, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for transitioning, to accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels in 2025? If you can give us a wider picture, and we'll deep dive into more in a moment.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I want to start by just providing a bit of context here. We're in Paris, and it's been 10 years since the Paris Agreement was signed, designed to keep us on track for 1.5 degrees warming, and we're not meeting those targets. Now, Paris was a very bold and ambitious agreement, and there's so much that we can learn from the last decade or so about where we need to strengthen that agreement. One of the issues with Paris is that it fails to mention the leading cause of the climate crisis, which the byproducts of the fossil fuel industry, coal, oil, and gas. And we need legislation that essentially tackles the expansion of fossil fuels, and that's where the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty comes in. It is here to actively target the fossil fuel industry and champion a just transition, making sure that no country gets left behind. We've been endorsed by 16 nation states and counting, many cities, WHO, Nobel Prize laureates, so many different champions from all around the world. And the momentum for this treaty is growing. And I might be biased in saying that I think it's the clearest pathway forward, but it's here to strengthen Paris. It shows us a way where we can live within 1.5 degrees of warming and actually put into practice so many of the amazing things that are happening in Uruguay, for instance.
100%.
Legislation is such a key loophole. The fossil fuel treaty actively targets that, and I believe that it's our best shot at staying within 1.5 degrees.
Thank you so much. And now for you, Shradha, you're going to come in with a much more, what we call glocal, think global, act local. So what's your glocal take on and where do you see as the most exciting opportunities?
So I see the most exciting opportunities in the actions and the discussions that are taking place at stages like this, at Change Now, at Paris, to be translated into action at the community level. For that, we need young people, change makers, to convert this language that takes place here into villages, a language that is understood by the villagers, by the rural communities, where energy transition and the use of fossil fuels is impacting them the most. What I see as the action that has to be taken is to invest in these people-first solutions, making sure that technology change, the regulatory aspect go hand in hand with behavior change in the communities, to make sure that we maintain the dignity of the local people, of women and communities that are impacted the most by it, and these changes affect them to make sure that the transition happens is impacting their lives in a better manner. And that change has to come from us advocating at the village level and working with the grassroots communities to change, to make that change happen.
Yeah, and we're going to come back on to the behavior change that's necessary for that to happen. Adam, if I can add a little bit onto the question to you specifically, because we're very interested in what Client Earth is doing, which is fundamentally to rewire the legal system. So I suppose what would be really great is to maybe hear more specifically about what is the challenge in trying to rewire what is a global legal system that Tory has had to work so hard to kind of use to get against, if that makes sense. Could you give us maybe more of a sense of the obstacles to the transition?
The obstacle and the opportunity is the whole underlying mental model. We have a huge opportunity with sufficiency. The very simple idea that we can live lives that are as good and even better with radically less energy. The IPCC told us this in March 2023, that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 70% by living fabulous lives with less consumption. And normally I would say that this is the elephant in the room or the memo that no one's writing. But on this stage yesterday, there was someone from EDF, the French electricity company, who said the same thing. So once sufficiency, this idea about the great lives we can lead with less energy, is driving lawmaking and policymaking in the energy space, we will make the transition. It's the rules and laws that are holding a model in place that we know is wrong and that need to change.
We wouldn't invent that model today were we waking up this morning. So I'm going to come back to climate litigation because we've really got the national treaties, we've got the global and we've got the legal framework. I think everybody in this room will be so interested to maybe hear a little word around how one goes about preventing the Cambo oil fields and Rosebank. Can you give us a sense, you were using a legal system that was ultimately against you. What was the main thing that you felt you could leverage it more?
Yeah, thank you. So for context, there is an oil field in the North Sea called Rosebank in the UK, which, if extracted, would produce 500 million barrels of oil, 200 million tons of CO2 emissions, equivalent to the 28 lowest income countries in the world. It is no small oil field. And we used climate litigation, the power of law, to stop this oil field in its tracks. And the way that we did that was through a phenomenal case that was brought forward by a woman named Sarah Finch, who essentially wanted the government and oil companies to account for what we call Scope 3 emissions. So it's not enough to just think about the emissions of extracting the oil and gas itself, but the emissions of burning that oil and gas, which a lot of firms and industries did not account for. And in the case of Rosebank, they pushed forward with this oil field, Equinor, a Norwegian state-owned oil giant, on the basis that it was within sort of a legal framework. But actually it was unlawful because the emissions of burning that oil would greatly surpass what the UK had signed up to commit to. So with Greenpeace and the Stop Rosebank campaign, we took Rosebank to court and Equinor in November of 2024, and in February we found out that we won our court case, effectively shutting down this oil field. And if I do say so myself, our campaign group has a pretty good track record because just 3 years prior, we managed to shut down Shell's Cambo oil field as well.
So if we could just tag on a little note around this idea of the fossil fuel treaty, or the anti-proliferation fossil fuel treaty. Can you just give us a quick snippet as to how that then builds on some of this action or this movement that it's working for our audience?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the power of law is indisputable, right? We're showing that climate litigation has the potential to put us on track, to stop these industries who are acting unlawfully, who are claiming that they're benefiting our world and our environment, what quite frankly aren't. You know, most of the oil and gas from Rosebank would have been exported and sold on the international energy market. There was no energy security. And something like the treaty is a framework which allows us to implement these changes, to transition to a renewable economy and make sure that nobody gets left behind, whilst also providing people with the infrastructure and resources to essentially tackle this mammoth of an industry that is pushing us off a cliff edge. I mean, I'm going to very briefly talk about the social license of the fossil fuel industry, which is their right to exist in a planet, you know, that quite frankly needs to divest rapidly. And as Ramon was saying, there is this culture around seeing fossil fuels as an inevitable reality of what we need to live in this world. That's completely false. Renewables are 10 times cheaper than they've ever been in the UK. We have the legal frameworks to show that we can do this. We have the resources. We have the willpower. And it's just about making sure that we're tackling the propaganda of the fossil fuel industry, who are essentially keeping us hooked on a system that, you know, is compromising everyone's lives. And as we've seen with Paris, we're not staying within 1.5 degrees of warming. We're nowhere near that. And the fossil fuel treaty is an opportunity for us to stay on track.
One of the other areas, which I think I'm going to come to you both about, which is this behavior change. You know, we talk so much, and can you share with us, and I'll start with you, Shradha, like just how the behavior change challenge shows up? And I'd love to hear the same for you, Adam, as well.
Sure. Save the planet. It's a very abstract slogan, and for you to rally people behind the slogan of save the planet is not easy. But the same thing, if you go and tell people that doing an activity or changing the way in which you're utilizing energy can better your life, can save time, can make sure you have health benefits, can give you enough time for you to then learn and engage in other economic opportunities, then the people are listening. The people in these communities need to see that there is a direct benefit and a tangible advantage that they can get from energy transition. And the way in which he was explaining about Uruguay and the way in which these exist, the marketing exists of the fossil fuel industry, is that even though they make the most pollution, the persons who are suffering are these communities at the local level, whereas they have not contributed to it. They don't even know about it, they don't know what their role was, but they're suffering because of it. For us to ask the question, who's benefiting the most out of this? Who's the person who's suffering the most out of this? And what change they can make at the community level is very important. And once you ask these questions and you have an answer to these questions, you realize that you can change the narrative. You can build a different narrative for the communities to get on board with. And that narrative is to make sure that these lofty goals and the discussions that we have at forums here at the COP are translated into action through small initiatives, through the initiatives that exist at the grassroots level, and that is what we need to do and bring in. To make sure that these communities are on board with that idea, we need to show a dual benefit. A benefit that exists for the environment and for the communities and for the households themselves. And that dual benefit example is something that I'm trying to put forth through GEMS and show that in action, to see that people can see this action and see the benefit that it brings to their lives and try to engage and build on that further.
Can you give us a sense? Yes, thank you, absolutely. Can you give us a sense of the number of people within the community that GEMS has been able to affect to date?
Absolutely. So GEMS has previously worked with one of the rural villages in India called Nalleli, and we've transitioned 75% of the households in a rural village to change their open pit cooking practices to low smoke cooking stoves and other alternatives.
Wow, 75. Imagine getting your community, your village, your town, imagine getting 75% of them to do something. So huge well done. Now we are coming to the end of our session, so I'm going to maybe amalgamate to our last question, Adam, and I'd like to kick off with you, which is we've got a room full of change makers. They're not all necessarily working directly in the ending fossil fuel arena. What is one thing that they can do to support Client Earth and its cause, its wider mission of changing the legal narrative for states and companies?
Very bluntly, donate to us and organizations like us, and support us in other ways. Share the information about the lawsuits that we're bringing. The only reason why it's possible for fossil fuel companies to continue to make money is because they are leading everyone to believe that this is a model that can continue when we know it's not. Yeah. Spread the word about the legal actions that we all take to show that there is no future for a fossil fuel industry, and that the law is changing right under their feet.
Thank you so much. Adam told you, so now you got to go and do it. What about you, Shradha?
Adam covered it beautifully. I would say invest in people-first solutions, because a focus on people leads to a focus on environment, and that is going to be mine.
Love it. And last but not least,
every single person in this room can endorse the fossil fuel treaty. Every single person. And that all that entails is going onto our website, registering your organization, registering your name. It actually makes a difference.
What do you say? Thank you so much, our panel. Before you move there, I'm going to ask the production team at the back, if they can go back to the Menti. If you can go back to your phones, there is one more. If you can go to the next slide, please. We're going to just get a bit of audience participation. Oh, next slide again, please. Yes. Have you already endorsed the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty? Yes. No, but I've heard of it. No, I wasn't aware of it. So this is why you came today, and I have reservations. Oh my goodness, look, Tori.
Yay.
Is this making you smile?
It is, and if there is anyone who has reservations, come chat to me and I'll change your mind.
Yes. There is a very good point, which is we will, at the very end of this session, we will go to the side of the stage. So if you do want to meet and speak to any of our speakers today, you will get a chance, or potentially even a selfie. I will make it happen, okay? Can I say a big thank you, big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.